Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something really fascinating. We're essentially mapping out an invisible continent. It is this vast, incredibly complex territory, but here's the catch. Its borders don't actually exist on any standard globe you've ever seen. Instead, these borders exist entirely on our plates. We're going to unpack the story of the Eastern Europe and the Slavic World Culinary Council and their absolute marathon of a journey to actually classify this region's cuisine.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Imagine trying to draw a map where the lines aren't decided by politicians signing treaties. Instead, you have borders dictated by the actual type of dirt beneath your feet, by the historical paths of the diaspora, and by the lingering ghosts of fallen empires. It really makes you ask, where does a cuisine actually begin and end? Well, that is exactly what we are figuring out today.
And that exact puzzle was the monumental challenge facing the Culinary Council. They're this team of academics tasked with classifying a gastronomic region that is just notoriously difficult to pin down. Because if you only look at modern nation-states, the ones drawn by wars and politics, you completely miss the culinary reality on the ground. To get to the truth, the council realized they had to look at culinary borders defined by ecology, by ancient trade routes, and by human migration.
All right, Section 1, Mapping a Culinary Continent, the Map Makers.
To build this radically new kind of map, the council brought in 3 absolute heavy hitters, and each one wielded a totally different compass. We have Dr. Zofia Mazur, whose lens is strictly geography, climate, and terroir, so she is looking squarely at the earth. Then there's Dr. Halyna Ostapenko, focusing on culture, language, and diaspora. She's tracking the people. And finally, Dr. Tomáš Procházka, whose lens is trade, empire, and exchange. He's the one tracing the invisible paths of history. 3 very different lenses, all trying to map the exact same region.
Which brings us to Section 2, the geography of taste.
Let's literally start from the ground up. Dr. Mazur's whole argument is that if you want to understand Eastern European food, you have to look down. The most important border in this entire region is actually buried underground. It's called the Chernozem line. This is a massive, continuous belt of dark, incredibly fertile black earth soil. It essentially slices the region right in half, completely dictating what crops can actually survive. I mean, it perfectly explains why Ukraine, sitting on that rich black earth, has a cuisine built on wheat and sunflower oil, while Belarus, just a few hundred kilometers north, has a totally different culinary bedrock.
Because once you head north of that Chernozem line, you hit a totally different reality, what Mazur calls the harsh podzol and bog larder. It's this cool maritime world where the soil is sandy and acidic. Wheat really struggles here, but rye absolutely thrives. So the cuisine up there is unified by this brilliant survival grammar. We're talking dense sourdough rye bread, root vegetables, Baltic herring, soured cream dairy, and a huge reliance on lacto-fermentation. Think sauerkraut and soured rye. You literally needed those techniques just to outlast the long, freezing winters without things like Mediterranean olive oil or fresh citrus.
Moving on to Section 3, culture, language, and diaspora. Because let's be real, food isn't just about dirt and weather. With our second lens, culture, Dr. Ostapenko beautifully shows how stateless communities and religious calendars create their own rich cross-border cuisines. Think about the sheer scale of these pan-regional traditions. You have the Pan-Orthodox monastic fast, right? This is a strict calendar requiring over 200 days of meatless and dairyless eating, which birthed these incredible mushroom, green, and beet dishes across multiple countries. Then you have the Ashkenazi Jewish kitchen, bringing its Shabbat and festival grammar all the way from Poland to Ukraine. And the Volga and Crimean Tatar Muslim kitchen, representing the steppe Islam interface. These traditions just refuse to be boxed into a single country. They literally travel with the people.
And that leads right into Section 4, Echoes of Fallen Empires.
This is where our third lens, trade and empire, from Dr. Procházka, comes into play. His argument is a real game changer. History physically slices right through modern nations, leaving these deep culinary fault lines. Take Romania, for instance. If you treat Romania as just one flat, unified culinary zone, you are completely missing the story. The country is fractured almost perfectly down the middle by old empires. In Transylvania, you have this heavy historical Habsburg influence. So goulash, sour cream, Central European pastries. But down in Wallachia and the south, it's heavily Ottoman. Mamaliga, sour chorba soups, and sarmale cabbage rolls. The culinary border literally runs right through the middle of the modern state.
Now, the council had to be super careful here so things didn't get too messy. They came up with this brilliant concept they call imperial sediment. These are massive, shared historical layers that blanket multiple countries. A great example is the Ottoman pastry overlay, things like burek and baklava that you find all over the Balkans, or the Soviet stolovaya layer, those totally homogenized mayonnaise salads spanning from Poland all the way up to the Baltics. The council decided these act as shared cultural sediment. They're a historical overlay, sure, but they do not define the bedrock cuisine of those nations. They're basically flags, not the foundation. Okay, Section 5, where the borders clash. As you can probably guess, bringing these three distinct lenses together was not exactly a walk in the park. When these incredibly sharp mapmakers collided during cross-examination, sparks definitely flew. Early on, Dr. Mazur had actually proposed grouping all the Balkan countries into one single terroir cluster, based on their shared sheep milk and fermentation habits. But during the debate, she famously dismantled her own proposal. She realized she was confusing that Ottoman imperial overlay we just talked about with actual native earth. She argued that clustering them meant substituting a political shorthand for actual ecological analysis, totally flattening out their deeply varied mountain and coastal terroirs. She self-corrected on the spot, which is just an incredible moment of academic honesty.
And man, did they battle over the Baltics. This debate is fascinating. The terroir lens argued for merging Latvia and Estonia. Why? Because they shared the exact same podzol and bog coastline, the exact same Baltic herring, and the exact same sourdough rye. Makes sense, right? But the culture lens vehemently fought to split them, pointing out a massive difference. Latvia is an Indo-European Baltic language, while Estonia is a Finno-European language. So the big question was, does a shared larder mean they are one cuisine, or do completely different linguistic roots mean they are two? Ultimately, the culture lens won this specific battle, and they were kept as separate entries.
They also completely bumped heads over the Carpathian highland kitchen. It's this mesmerizing transhuman sheep dairy corridor. Think deeply distinct mountain cheeses and ancient pasture techniques. It forms this continuous arc stretching across Poland, Slovakia, Ukraine, and Romania. The trade lens actually wanted to break it up and assign it as regional context to each separate country. But the terroir and culture lenses teamed up on this one. They argued, no way. It's a single, unified tradition that four modern political maps just happen to shred right through. Which finally brings us to Section 6, the final culinary map. So after all that academic friction, after the earth, the people, and the empires all had their say, what did the map finally look like? The council landed on exactly 23 top-level culinary entries. It is this brilliant taxonomy that just beautifully balances Mazur's earth, Ostapenko's people, and Procházka's empires. The absolute bedrock of this map includes 19 distinct sovereign country-level cuisines, and it carefully carves out regions by recognizing those deep cultural splits rather than just taking the easy way out. It acknowledges the Baltic split, keeping Latvia and Estonia standing alone. It confirms an independent Moldova, recognizing its own unique culinary identity despite the terroir it shares with Romania. And it retains individual Balkan state identities, totally rejecting that easy political lumping Mazur had originally proposed. But then, towering over those 19 political lines, you have these 4 majestic pan-regional traditions. These are the foodways that simply refused to be contained by a geographic map. You have the Ashkenazi Jewish kitchen, the Pan-Orthodox Lenten fast, the Volga and Crimean Tatar kitchen, and of course, the Carpathian Highland pastoral kitchen, which rightfully earned its place as a standalone tradition stretching across 4 modern borders. Ultimately, what this whole explainer really drives home is how incredibly resilient food is. It outlives the empires that try to contain it. It travels with diasporas across entire continents, and it remains stubbornly bound to the soil long after political borders are erased and redrawn. Understanding this map completely changes how you look at a simple bowl of soup or a slice of rye bread. It really leaves us to wonder, what invisible borders and what hidden histories are sitting on your dinner plate tonight? Keep exploring, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.